Bring to us your poetry from inspiration sought. Come join us with your images, your verses, words, and thought. From here, we'll share your balladry with those who do not know it. This platform's here for you to show the world that you're the poet.
Welcome to episode 4 of You're the Poet, the poetry podcast featuring you. I'm host Matt Bergio, and I'm here with co-host Phil Bergio. Phil, welcome.
Thank you.
Here at You're the Poet, our purpose is to share our love of poetry with the world and to invite you to do the same. If you've written any poetry and you want to share it here, whether you just have an interest in poetry, consider yourself an amateur poet, or are a professional poet with published works, contact us to be a guest on a future episode. Please check out the website at you'rethepoet.com, follow us on Facebook for updates and info, and send us an email to host@you'rethepoet.com for feedback or questions about the podcast and how to be our next guest. Our featured guest for this episode of You're the Poet is Mark McDermott. Mark, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Mark is joining us today from Belgium. We're glad you could join us, and we look forward to your contribution to the episode. To start things off, I'm going to turn it over to Phil to share with us a classic poem for the episode. Phil?
Thank you. This is by William Butler Yeats. The Lake Isle of Innisfree. I will arise and go now and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin built there of clay and wattle made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honeybee, and I live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the crickets sing, their midnight all a glimmer and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet wings. I will arise and go now, for always night and day I hear the lake water lapping with loud sounds by the shore. While I stand in the roadway or on the pavements gray, I hear it in the deep heart's core. William Butler Yeats.
All right, thank you for sharing. I will admit I haven't studied or read much Yeats outside of high school English literature classes, so that's kind of something new for me. Sure.
Oh, I thought it was great. I really it's definitely a yearning for some peaceful rural space and some independent kind of the 9 rows of beans, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of a interesting coincidence, but the poem I'm going to read is basically about places of peace and tranquility.
Nice. All right, so on to our next portion of the episode. I'm going to read a poem. This one's called The Faithful Robin, Red-Breasted and Proud. And this poem's just basically about the onset of spring and how spring tends to take its time. We keep getting that cold weather, the rainy weather, the stormy weather, back and forth, and how spring takes its time getting here. So this is The Faithful Robin, Red-Breasted and Proud. The faithful robin, red-breasted and proud, brings with it the hope of coming spring. Yet west winds still prevail, bringing rain and winter's chill. The sun, ashamed, stays hidden. Storms now conquer the land. Their dark clouds sweep the hills and release their thunder loud. Day after day, week to week, the river now expands. The rain falls in showers unbidden and sometimes joins with hail. Now the spring begins to tease, here one day, gone the next. It fights the rain, the fog, the chill. Spring, being masked, takes a stand, and the life it brings begins to show. The grass grows green, the trees sprout leaves, flowers bloom across the field. I see now what the robin brings, the unhindered promise of joyful spring. Matthew Bergio. It was kind of funny. I thought about that poem this morning as I was sitting having my coffee outside, and I could hear the robins in the trees and thinking, spring's kind of finally here. We've sort of gotten past this storms and cold for the most part.
That poem describes Ohio to a T, at least this part of Ohio with the spring coming and going.
True.
I'd say this year we're feeling it too. We had some nice weather and it started to feel nice, and then more rain and gloom just kind of set back in, and but it kind of like it builds its way up, pushes through. Yeah.
All right, for our next segment, I'm going to turn it back over to Phil to share with us some of his poetry.
I wrote this poem a couple days ago. It's called The Gentle Old Men. It's based on my trip down to the Smokies a week or so ago. The Gentle Old Men. I've trekked the Rockies, those youthful harsh peaks whose majesty and grandeur are what another seeks. But I love the Smokies, those kind and gentle hills whose essence is that of kindly old men with wise and tender souls. One sees just how they got their name, the plumes and blankets of blue haze, To the Cherokee, they're called Chickanahay, the land of blue smoke, and are native to their fame. With lush green peaks and water falling like tears down rocks, happy tears, not sad, for those of one whose hearts care. Places of solitude, peaceful scenes, where smiles are heard. Home to bear and deer and singing bird, I plan to return to those rolling green hills. That's my expectant goal, to be back at that loving, kind place to reclaim a piece of my soul. Phil Bergio.
All right, nice. It's funny, you talk about the wise old men and someone who's always wanted to see the Rockies and finally did, how the grandeur of the Rockies, they look wicked in splendor, but a lot of people don't realize that the Appalachians, the Smokies, they don't look as grand, but that's because they're much, much older.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it actually really hits home for me on a point. I was hanging out with one of my really close college friends recently, and he was going through like an adventure period. He was doing an Arctic trek. He lives in Colorado now. He loves the Rockies, but growing up in Ohio, I asked him what his favorite mountain range in the world was, and he talks about, portions of the Appalachian and just kind of feeling really comfortable and at home there. I'd love to send him your poem.
Go for it.
Have him listen to
We'll
the
have him listen to the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, moving on from there, Mark, you're up next in the episode. So you're the poet. Show us what you've got.
First off, yeah, I'm a little overwhelmed. There's so many things I'm excited to talk to you about. But one of the things that I think is really cool is I was thinking about this last couple of days, and this is really kind of a continuation of a conversation we had. And I think it was just over your left shoulder. I don't remember the year, but it was somewhere between 20 and 25 years ago. And you, Matt, had a book of poetry. And I asked you what you had, and you said, I have a book of poems. And I said, like, have you read it yet? And you said something like, it's good to read some poetry more than once, or something with that messaging. I can't remember the exact words. It came back to me, and I was really thinking about that. So it's really cool to do this with you guys. I've been writing some poetry on and off for a long time. I wrote some at work. I've written poetry at work, which was kind of cool. I've written poetry with my mom, which is neat. My brother and I. Funny little lines, some sad lines that kind of helped me think through some stuff. The poem I'm reading today, and I'm really excited about this one, it's sort of a story kind of poem, and it's about an experience I had in Morocco. For just some context, I was traveling with my wife and a pair of friends of ours. There's a lot of bartering there, and we didn't really know how to do that. You read some blogs and you figure out some percentages, but it makes you feel like really uncomfortably foreign because there's no prices and things are always just kind of nebulous. We were on a cultural tour with our tour guide, and they were taking us around and showing us how they make mosaics and how they make pottery and how they weave certain cloths and how they weave different styles of carpets. And they drove us around the city and all throughout. We ended up at this carpet place, and we very much thought we're just on a tour to learn about this stuff. And they let us play with the looms, and it became a hardcore negotiation that we just kind of weren't expecting. Friends of ours came to the country with the intention of buying a new carpet for themselves. They were moving together, and they wanted a piece that they bought for their communal home. They had some prices in mind, but the numbers just swirl and spin and have very little meaning. That's kind of what my poem is about. Secured, or perhaps captured, deep inside a carpet castle, we had ourselves a mighty hassle. Foolishly thinking we were on a tour, the demonstrations now seem a little like a lure. This is how we work the loom. See right here as the arrangements bloom. More carpets flipped, and then there were fewer. Ah, okay, you like them a little bluer. There were so many colors and shapes to see. Let's talk about a few. How about these three? Before we knew quite what was happening, a new character appeared. His seat he was flattening. He'd been summoned by a younger man. He was a practiced technician, head of their clan. A force brought to life by the challenge of the haggle. Spitting words softly echoed clash of previous battle. He perched himself upon his pile of thread, this old man that jousted with an experienced head. Look right here at the superb quality. Stop right there, you owe me an apology. How could you possibly believe that I'm keeping you here as a captive? You're clearly here to culturally learn, but let's just talk. Wait, now it's my turn. No pressure, just smiles. You can leave when you choose, but please don't insult me and take off your shoes. You must step on these carpets before you can leave. Dig your toes deep in the handmade weave. The quality is top and beyond compare. Touch it to flame, test it I dare. This one here is such fine silk, each one unique, no other in their ilk. Now let me tell you about dead wool. It's a fool's product, may as well be mule. And I don't know if you know this design, but it's about the weaver's children. It says here there were 9. And this one here that's full of symbolic meaning. In 100 years, it won't ever require cleaning. We adjust a bit, seated on our bench, a collective shift in a communal clench. Suddenly, all at once aware, negotiations had begun. We couldn't run, it wasn't fair. This master of trade and cunning merchant knew he was selling to us, the unobservant. As we walked in like cattle unaware, this matador pulled us in as a simple breath of air. An initial price was received quite by surprise that caused ripples in 4 stomachs, possibly silkworm butterflies. There seemed to be too much space to negotiate. We had no idea what was now culturally appropriate. A number was tossed softly, not meaning to insult, but that was not fully the intended result. With a flashing grin and sparkling eyes, decades of skill poured forth to baptize. This peak fighter now sank in. The fight was on. He was confident he'd win. Both sides now aware of the battle, jousts were made and sabers rattled. Other carpets of lesser quality were shown, but over and again, back to the one that was known. The price dropped quick to our surprise. Could the numbers up front be only lies? Did they always start with so much meat on the bone? Are prices feathered suggestions and not immovable stone? Through shock and discomfort, there was this revelation. It was an experience, to be sure, and on this occasion, a mutual price was found in the same place of the vendor and customer, a smile on each face. Mark McDermott. It's a lot to read out loud.
Nice. I really like that.
It's a good one. I like that.
It's funny. I smiled the whole way through, just thinking I could picture you guys haggling and how
Right. Very visual. You can get that in your mind. Very visual.
Right. How some of those
we were
merchants
seated on this bench, and like we're all at once, we were like, "Oh shoot, they're trying to sell us." And the guy that appeared was like, man, he was something magical. He sat down on the carpets and he said, "I have to sit. I have cardiac." And he had been brought out because the other guy who'd been showing us the tour, this was his brother, was like, "Oh, I don't handle hard negotiations." Again, not knowing we were negotiating, so he brought his brother in. And
if you were going to cast the old man in a movie, who would you cast?
Oh man, it's an old Moroccan guy. I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, I'm seeing
Grizzled
somebody
old
like
Moroccan guy, like crazy smart. And when you're trying to go through these things, we had some other like funky negotiations. You can think and you can, oh, I'm going to come up with this number or this or what. These guys have done it like 60, 80 years, whatever it is. It's nothing new to them. They like, you're forgettable as much as, oh, it's so difficult. You're trying to break my balls or whatever it is.
Did you
like,
purchase that rug or was it your friends that purchased it?
So our friends wanted to buy a rug in Morocco. They weren't anticipating buying it that day, I think, or in Fez, but they ended up buying a carpet there, way a little more than they expected to pay overall with the intent, but quite a bit less than what the carpet was initially priced at.
Yeah.
Did you buy a carpet?
No, we have some interesting carpets already, and with the moves ahead and everything that we weren't going to pay. And I think we were in carry-on luggage, like with the intent to remain in carry-on luggage. So no carpets.
Gotcha.
Lots of other fun stuff.
You got another poem for us?
Well, so I was thinking about this Morocco one, and there's some interesting adventures through that country. And this is one I've been wanting to write for a while. And sometimes I'll start a poem or a couple lines somewhere, and I try to write what I'm thinking or doing at the time to kind of give it some context with a date. And there's a handful that like keeps scratching at the back of my head, like you need to write these soon before they're not as relevant. So I was resting with my wife earlier while she was taking a nap, and I wrote this one down, and I'm kind of happy with it. I think it might need some refinement, but it's a similar kind of set of couplets. I don't know. I try not to write just couplets, but they seem to flow a lot easier and be fun to write. I try to branch out, but if it's not terribly fun, I don't really want to do it. So anyhow, that's me justifying this. But I'm ready to read this if you are ready for me.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll give you more context after the poem, but I'm curious to see how it stands on its own.
It was a poem right there.
That is a poem right there. One of the things that I was trying to do is if you write poetry regularly, a daily poem or something like that. You just kind of speak with a little rhyme or some structured meter that's interesting. Anyhow, here's my poem. As clear as a bell and with no doubt remaining, our guide shouted 3 words, simply explaining why perhaps drinking from a bowl of milk in the sun, from a camel no less, could be less than fun. That only 4 hours left of a 9 hour drive might make this decision a group exercise. He said it twice and across the station. Again, just 3 words and hopeful salvation. To save my guts with something our barber knew and the nausea of friends, probably the driver too. It can come with a touch of danger, this roadside libation, but a brand new milk was reason for celebration. I chanced it and was lucky, quenching my thirst. Thirst for new milk, but adventure foremost and first. Newness takes risks, and risk may be injury, but gaining experience can't be done walking gingerly. Regardless the risk, it helps to be informed, and his advice leaves me eternally transformed. I'll never forget those 3 words he said. Beware the diarrhea. Stuck forever in my head. Mark McDermott.
Dude, that is great. Although I love the concept of like the adventure and the interest that it's not about drinking the new milk, it's the adventure of doing something new. I love that idea there.
Okay, now I'm not saying this in a bad way. I think this is a compliment, but Dr. Seuss type poems popped in my head. I guess it's the same rhythm or whatever.
Yeah, I could see that, like the flow and the rhythm.
The flow, yeah.
That.
I ain't saying that in a bad way, but I like this.
Yeah, I like it.
Well, yeah,
I
me
like
too. It's cool.
that it flows, and I like that it can. You can add some character to some of the. I have a couple of like. There was a kid we were traveling with, and I was tapping some music on my chest, and he's like, "What are you doing? What am I doing?" And so I wrote a poem about what I was tapping out, like the rhythm of life. It comes out like
That's
Dr.
cool.
Seuss.
You couldn't hear. I don't think you could hear us, but when we start laughing, had to back away from the mics. How did the camel milk taste?
Well, so I didn't. I intentionally, especially with he yelled this twice to me across the gas station parking lot. He yelled this twice to me, so I didn't want to drink a lot of it. But like they'd fill like a liter of whatever for some amount of money for people like the locals, and I asked if I could just pay for a sample, and they gave me a glass, pretty dirty glass, pretty dirty bowl of milk. It was a big bowl of milk, just like with a cheesecloth over it. I tried to pay 6 times. They refused it. They refused money every time I offered it. So I ended up with a little bit of milk, and I tried it. It didn't taste wholly different from whole cow milk to me. I don't know what I was expecting, but yeah. So yeah, those were kind of fun to write. That style of poem, I think, ends up being a lot easier for me to write. I feel, like I said, I feel a little like I should sometimes explore some poetry. And I wrote a line about wanting to write more ballads with and without E, structural changes with a ballad and with an E and without an E.
Well, your poems are easy listening. I like them.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think both of those were very entertaining. But I know what you mean, because when I tend to get stuck in the ballad form, like I mentioned in one of the previous episodes, that probably a bulk of my poetry all falls into that certain ballad form.
Yeah.
The same rhyme scheme and things like that, and kind of the same setup. And I try really hard to okay, I need to write some poetry outside of that, some different styles, some different forms and things. So I definitely understand that. All right, Mark, is there anything else you wanted to say or share or anything like that? Or
I don't know, man. There's a lot of fun stuff to talk about. I know you've written Uncle Phil. You've written some stuff in French, right? I'm trying to write a little poetry in French now too. And
actually, I don't remember doing that, but I was thinking about that. Definitely, I was thinking about that today, writing some haiku in French.
Yeah,
your mind is connecting with mine.
I've tried it a couple times. I'm working on one for the local dragon legend here that I want a couple French terms and phrases in. It's fun to rhyme English and French too. There was someone telling my wife that her eyes were beautiful in a store somewhere, just some random store. And no, it's and it rhymes. This rhymes in English. So I thought you knew. Vous avez des bisous.
One of the things I always wanted to do, I took 4 years of French in high school, and in the poetry realm, I always thought it would be neat to write a poem in French, a rhyming poem, but that also rhymed in English, because there's a lot of those conjugated endings that, are similar to the certain verbs in French, that if you could pair them up with the ones in English, I always thought it'd be interesting, because I always feel like, when you read translated poetry is such a sound and word specific art that I always feel like there's definitely got to be stuff lost in translation when you translate poetry. And so I always thought it would be neat to write a poem in French that, when translated into English, also rhymed. I thought that would kind of be interesting.
Yeah, I have actually. I have something that does that a little bit. I was trying to play with that as well. I'm looking through my notes now to try to find it because it's interesting to try to find how can I tweak this sentence? How do I tweak what I want to say in this language so that it rhymes in the other one, right?
Right.
And they end up in these kind of. So I look at a lot of the poetry like these puzzles, math puzzles.
Yeah.
Maybe think about like an expression that you want to end on or something strong or you end up getting to a word and then I want to look at the set of words that rhyme with it and then the set of words that are synonyms for it. So maybe I
Exactly.
could swap it
Yeah,
out and then I want to look at
exactly.
the rhymes of the synonyms and you can build out graphs. And so I've written some code and stuff to like build out these graphs. So then you can kind of poke around and go, yeah, no, it's that pair, right? It's that
I
pair
do
that
that in my mind without the mathematical stuff. But I see we're talking about this. That's the truth. Look for synonyms and what rhymes with this and put them together. Because you
yeah,
don't
how
want
do
to
I
keep repeating the same word in your poem.
oh no, I hate
Right.
that.
Right. I do a lot of jotting stuff like that and different rhymes down in like the margins of where I'm writing my poetry, like in my poetry notebook. I'll have like, okay, here's the rhyme, and I'll write down like 10 words that rhyme with it and try to think about how that fits together with what I want to say.
Yeah, come back to it, think
Yeah.
about it a little bit. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So with that, we're going to continue on. Got a little bit of feedback from previous episodes. First, more of a comment. In episode 2, Phil read the Emily Dickinson poem, Angels in the Early Morning. He mentioned a connection to a Simon and Garfunkel song where they mentioned Frost and Dickinson together. I just wanted to point out that that song was Dangling Conversation. Next, some feedback from Brett E. Man, I'm loving the podcast. You inspired me this morning to write a little one. I've never really been creative in that avenue, but it was fun and I can see myself doing it again. Brett, thank you. I mean, that's what this podcast is all about, building the community and sharing the love of poetry. So thank you. So that's all we have for this week. Thank you for tuning in. Again, check out our website at you'rethepoet.com. Find this podcast on Spotify and Apple and Amazon and other places where podcasts can be found. Find us on Facebook and follow our page. And send us an email to host@you'rethepoet.com to provide any feedback for this episode or contact us about being a guest on a future episode. Again, thanks for listening. Phil, thanks for being with us.
You're welcome anytime.
And Mark, thanks for joining us all the way from Belgium.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we look forward to having you again in future episodes. So thank you guys. Bye.